Hey guys, Matt here from Dark Meat Games. In this video I'm going to walk you through the basic functionality of Cubedit, the Voxel Toolkit for Unity. Cubedit is a simple set of assets that allows for the rapid creation of voxel geometry directly in the Unity editor. For me, good game design is all about trying out new ideas quickly. When it takes you 2 seconds to test something instead of 10, you'll just naturally end up with better, more refined results. And sure, I'll be the first to tell you that there are lots of other tools out there that result in more attractive, more realistic, or more complicated assets, but Cubedit is all about being fast and easy, so that you can quickly make your ideas real and refine them until they're perfect. And Cubedit can be used as much or as little as you want. It won't change a thing about your current project, and when you're done using it, you can easily remove it without losing anything. So let's take a look at how to use Cubedit. I'm going to give you a very quick demo first, then we'll take a look at some of the settings one at a time. To get started, first load up the empty demo scene from the Cubedit Demo Scenes folder. Then, find the empty voxel structure prefab found in the root of the Cubedit folder and drag it onto the scene. This is just an empty game object with the voxel structure CS component. This component is responsible for pretty much everything. It requires the mesh render, the mesh filter, and the mesh collider. It also has the Atlas material applied, which is a transparent cutout diffuse shader which uses the Atlas Photoshop file texture. It's marked as static by default to help with optimization, but you should feel free to change that as needed. So let's take our voxel structure, set its position back to 0, and set a couple of walls down to get us started. Floor, ceiling, back wall, left wall. Great. So I want this room to kind of have a bridge spanning across it. So I'm going to switch over to the max pull tool. Click here, here, here. Great. Let's make it a little wider. Great. Now I'm going to carve out a doorway. And I'll switch back to add to place a couple of blocks along our path. Whoops. And we'll carve out a couple of windows. Great. Let's drag out another prefab. Make sure this position is where we want it. This time, we're going to change the height because we want our character to travel upwards. And we'll add some walls again. Left wall, floor, ceiling, back wall, right wall. Great. So we'll carve out another doorway. And we'll place some stairs. Whoops, looks like we made the doorway a little bit too high, so let's just fix that. Great. And now let's create some platforms. Yeah. And we'll just repeat this. And there we go. We have a very, very basic level layout. Let's carve some more doors. Whoops. Great. Okay, now let's go back and decorate. So we'll go back to our original room. And I'm just going to add some lights because we know those are important. So I'll drag out a couple of these. And I'll copy that. Whoops. And I'll copy these. Drag them over here. One more time. And we'll drag these up. And over. Great. Now let's go back and add some scenery elements. So we're going to switch over to the crate because we're in some kind of cellar, I don't know, deliveries from the netherworld or something. So we'll add a couple of crates here. Can add a couple here. Whatever feels, I don't know, right. And let's go over to here, do the same thing. So we're going to switch back to add and crate. I'll add a couple. And a couple more. Great, and let's just play to take a look at it. Not too bad. You can see we got a pretty good frame rate. And there you have it. Nothing too exciting, but hopefully that gives you a quick idea on how to use it and what you can get out of it in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so now that you have a better idea of what Cubedit can do, I'm going to take you through each of the settings and properties one at a time. So over here in the inspector, we see a couple of drop-downs, some input fields, a bunch of checkboxes, and a whole bunch of buttons. First, we see the current voxel type drop-down. This is probably what you're going to change the most of. It determines what happens whenever you take an action or press a button. So for instance, right now we have crate selected and our left mouse button action is add. So whenever we click, we'll add a crate. And this applies for all of the buttons and all of the actions as well. So if we switch back to stone, when we click, we'll be placing stone. Makes sense. So below that, you'll see the left mouse button action and the right mouse button action. These determine what happens whenever you click with either the left mouse button or the right mouse button. I pretty much always have erase mapped to the right mouse button, but feel free to switch it. These are both the same. And right now I'll go through each of the actions. Adding is pretty self-explanatory, so is erasing. Paint, instead of adding a new voxel, this will actually just change whatever voxel you clicked on. So if we click on this crate while we have stone selected, it will just change that voxel. Next up is max pull. You saw me use it a lot in the demo. And what this does is it takes wherever you click and creates a column of blocks. This is good for pillars, platforms, stairs, bridges. I use it all the time. So let's undo that. Next we have flood, and what this does is it will take wherever you click and take that Y value and create a whole layer of blocks there. Just like that. So it's really good if you want to split a level in half, or you want to increase the depth of your ground or something like that. So let's undo that. And finally, none. This one basically just makes it so that you have a safe way to click and drag as you'd expect. Sometimes you'll notice that the left mouse button action or the right mouse button action kind of overwrites what you're doing. Like if you wanted to pan the screen but you didn't want to accidentally erase something, you would just go in here and make sure that the right mouse button is set to none. You can also do what I do and just kind of click off to the side here, and you won't have this problem. Up next, you'll see the dimensions. This just determines what size the room will be. The max currently is 32 by 32 by 32. In the future, that maximum will go away completely, and I'll just spawn new game objects whenever the mesh gets too big. But for now, this is a nice, easy way to keep it within the limits. Below that, you'll see draw front, draw back, draw top, and the rest. This is a nice little optimization trick. So say we're creating a side scroller, right? And we know that the camera will never see the backside of our mesh. So let's just disable it. So we'll click here, and then we'll click draw. And it looks the same here, right? But if we go around to the back, we'll notice that all of those faces are gone, which is going to save us a lot of verts and a lot of tries. So let's do this for the other voxel structure as well. We'll turn off draw back, hit draw, and there you go. This is also useful if you're making a top-down dungeon crawler type game. You can disable the bottom or whatever works for your game. And finally, we have a whole bunch of buttons. So to show these off, I'm going to drag out another voxel structure. Let's put it over here so that it fits. And we'll re-zero it. Whoops. Good. All right, so I showed you solid cube. Makes a solid cube of voxels. Room with back, just a quick way to have 5 walls. Good for a side scroller. And room without back. You saw me use all of the left wall, right wall, floor. I use these a bunch in the demo. They basically just add the walls. I use these a lot. And below that, you'll see this sort of utility function that was useful for me. This is really just to show you guys how to create your own functions and buttons. If you search through the code, you can see what's happening and create your own custom functions. But just to show you, there. So this basically goes through every 8 steps and creates a pillar. Below that, you'll see draw, which just tells the mesh to re-render. Sometimes you'll find that the mesh data isn't being reflected properly, so you'll just want to hit draw to make sure that everything's as it should be. And finally, clear all, which just erases everything. And don't worry, you can Control Z to get things back. And of course, that works for all of the functions, though sometimes it's a little finicky depending on which game object you control, but there's not really anything I can do. At least I don't think. And finally, export mesh. This one's a little weird, so it's going to require a little bit of setup. So let's say we've finished our room and we really like it, and we want to save it so we can create copies of it. Well, normally you just take it and drag it into your project view, right? Let's drag it just into the root. Let's drag it into the bonus prefabs folder. Great. And all right, let's drag a whole bunch of copies out. Well, that's weird, right? Our room's not gone. Well, what happened is Unity only saved that mesh in the scene. It never created a mesh asset. The same way that if you create a material procedurally and try and save it, that material doesn't exist unless you somehow serialize that asset. So that's exactly what this export mesh does. You'll notice that if I go back over here and click on draw, well, the mesh is there, or at least the voxel data was there, which allowed us to draw the mesh. This time, let's go ahead and click on the Export Mesh button. And we'll save it. Cubedit, bonus prefabs. Let's just save it in here. And now you'll see, great, we've got our little voxel structure. And let's get rid of this one. Yep. And we'll create a new prefab. Oh, we don't want this one. We want this one. And now when we drag it onto the scene, boom, just as you'd expect. Okay, great. So I'm going to clean up this scene a little bit. All right, so hopefully you guys have a better idea of what Cubedit is and what you can do with it. I've left a link to the Unity asset store if you're interested. And I've also left my contact info. If you have any feedback whatsoever, please let me know or leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.